Extreme programming, also known as XP, is another Agile methodology or framework. It was created by Kent Beck and formally introduced in October 1999 when he published a book called Extreme Programming Explained. XP has some similarities to Scrum but also has major differences from Scrum. The similarities between Scrum and XP are that XP also uses sprints and follows some of the same ceremonies as in Scrum. However, the differences between Scrum and XP are the additional roles and practices that are required in XP. Let's talk about the roles in XP. There are 8 roles in XP: customer, programmer, tester, doomsayer, coach, tracker, manager, and gold owner. Customer. This role is responsible for writing user stories, including functional tests or acceptance criteria, story prioritization, and answering questions on user stories. This role is not actually the end user or the actual customer, rather someone within the organization that interfaces with the customer and has a good grasp on the actual customer needs and wants. Programmer. As you can guess, this is the coder. The programmer or coder is responsible for estimating stories, defining tasks from stories, defining task estimates, and implementing user stories and unit tests. Tester. This role is responsible for defining and running tests on the implemented user stories and also tracking the overall testing results via charts or graphs so as to be aware of the overall health of testing. The tester role is also responsible for informing the team if there are any adverse or negative trends in quality. Doomsayer. The doomsayer role is responsible for ensuring that the team is always aware of any pitfalls or potential risks. And more importantly, this role is responsible for pointing out when a team is in trouble or about to be in trouble. Coach. The coach observes or keeps an eye on the goings-on of the entire XP team to ensure that work is moving smoothly and that XP practices are being adopted correctly. This role needs to be ready to use subtle hints or insightful questions or suggestive influence to nudge or prod the XP team in the right direction and help them course correct as needed. The coach role is also ready to help with anything. Please note that this role is not responsible for the actual delivery commitments of the XP team. Tracker. The tracker focuses on the well-being of the programmer. A tracker will typically meet informally with the programmers once or twice a week for a quick check-in to see how the programmer is doing, to ensure that they have what they need to keep making progress, that they are not blocked, etc. Don't confuse the tracker role with the role of a project manager. This is not about micromanaging programmers or ensuring that they are completing their tasks on time, etc. Rather, the tracker role is an enabler type role to support programmers. Based on feedback from programmers or a tracker's own observations, some of the actions a tracker may take is set up a meeting between a programmer and customer, or ask a coach or another developer to help, etc. Manager. This role is responsible for setting up XP meetings or ceremonies, such as the planning game, among other ceremonies. Ensuring that the correct process is followed in these ceremonies and documenting the results of such meetings for future reporting. In addition, the manager role is responsible for attending other non-XP meetings in the broader organization and bringing back to the XP team useful information as needed. This role is not like a traditional manager where he or she is directing resources and telling them what to do and when to do it, or penalizing them for lateness, etc. And finally, gold owner. This role funds the project. This role is not to be confused with the XP customer role. In general, it is not good to combine any of the XP roles. Rather, keep them distinct. Alright, now let's talk about the practices prescribed in XP. XP includes 12 practices that are grouped under 4 categories. The 4 categories are fine-scaled feedback, continuous process, shared understanding, and programmer welfare. And the practices under each of these categories are pair programming, planning game, test-driven development, and whole team under fine-scale feedback. Under continuous process, you have continuous integration, design improvement, and small releases. Under shared understanding, you have coding standards, collective code ownership, system design, and system metaphor. And under programmer welfare, you have sustainable pace. Since this lecture is an intro into XP and not an exhaustive review, I will cover only some of these practices. So let's talk about the planning game. As the name suggests, this is a planning meeting which takes place at the beginning of each sprint or iteration. There are two parts to the planning game. Part 1 is for release planning, where the team decides the content of the next release and the timeline of that release. And Part 2 is a sprint planning, where the team decides which user stories to work on in that sprint. Once release plan is agreed upon by the team, the successive planning games typically focus mostly on sprint planning aspects. Also, please note that XP iterations or sprints are either 1 week or 2 weeks. 3-week sprints in XP are extremely rare. Rather, most XP teams go with 1-week sprints. Pair programming. This is a practice where two developers work at the same desktop or laptop together. One developer writes code while the other observes and reviews each line of code as it is written, making suggestions or asking questions as needed. Coding standard. This is a practice where the team agrees to a set of rules or policies or standards with regard to how they write code. Coding standards provides several benefits, such as significantly reducing the chances of defects, making code easily maintainable, keeping technical debt in check, and reducing the overall effort to refactor code later. So these are the only XP practices that I will cover, and once again, this is due to the fact that the purpose of this lecture is to give an intro to XP. Feel free to research the other XP practices if your team is deciding to use XP as their Agile framework. In addition to above practices, XP teams also do daily stand-ups, retrospectives, and demos. XP teams decide the frequency of retrospectives. It is not uncommon for an XP team to hold retrospectives every 2 sprints, especially if the team is practicing 1-week sprints. As you know, this is unlike Scrum, where you are required to hold a retrospective after every sprint. And with regard to demos, XP teams demo stories to stakeholders throughout the sprint as stories get implemented. They don't necessarily wait till the end of the sprint to hold a demo. Alright, so that brings us to the end of this lecture, and hopefully it helped you understand some of the fundamentals of the XP framework.